The soup had just reached a gentle roll when I heard the soft shuffle of Matthew's sneakers on the linoleum behind me. I didn't turn around. I simply kept stirring in slow, deliberate circles, the way I had stirred 1,000 pots in this same kitchen over the last 35 years. Steam rose in delicate spirals, warming my cheeks, carrying the scent of time and memory. Matthew cleared his throat, the way he used to when he was 8 and about to confess that he had broken a window with the baseball. Only this time, he was 45, and the thing he was about to break was me. "Pack your bags," he said, voice flat, almost bored, as though he were reading the weather report. "You're going to live with Jessica's mother." Jessica stepped in behind him, arms folded beneath her chest, that painted-on smile already in place. The one she wore whenever she was about to deliver something cruel wrapped in sugar. Matthew didn't wait for me to respond. He never waited anymore. "Jessica and I are moving into this house," he continued, hands still buried in the pockets of his jeans. "You'll take the spare room at her mom's. I already spoke with her. It's arranged." Jessica glided forward and rested both palms on the back of the oak chair my husband had built the year Matthew started kindergarten. "Eleanor," she began, syrupy sweet, "please try to understand. This house is far too large for one person now. You can't possibly keep up with the yard, the repairs, the stairs. We're younger. We can manage everything. And her mother truly does need the company. You'll be so much happier there, surrounded by people who can look after you properly." Matthew nodded along like a bubble, the way he had nodded at everything she said for the last 5 years, as though her words had replaced his own thoughts. I turned the burner off. I placed the lid on the pot with the soft clink of porcelain on steel. I dried my hands on the faded apron that still carried faint traces of my husband's aftershave in the fibers. Only then did I turn and look at them. My son had his father's eyes, cold, certain, utterly convinced the world would bend because he had decided it should. Jessica's smile widened another millimeter, triumphant. They mistook my silence for surrender. They had no idea that 3 months earlier, while they were at the mall spending money they didn't have, I had found the manila folder wedged beneath their winter sweaters in the back of the closet. Inside were documents that made my blood turn to ice. A power of attorney form with my signature forged in Matthew's careful slanted handwriting, a sales contract listing this house, my house, the one my husband and I had built brick by brick on nights and weekends and double shifts, for half its actual value to Jessica's brother. A glossy brochure from St. Michael's retirement home with August 15th, circled in red ink and marginal notes about how my pension would cover the first 6 months and then I could be quietly transitioned to the Medicaid wing where no one asks questions. They had no idea I had stood outside their bedroom door at 2 a.m. on 4 separate nights and listened to them whisper about how much easier life would be once I was taken care of. They had no idea that the very next morning I had taken the city bus downtown, walked into the law office of Gregory Price, and paid the retainer fee with the emergency cash I had hidden inside the hollowed-out Bible my mother gave me in 1973. The doorbell rang then, sharp and sudden, slicing through the kitchen like a guillotine. Matthew's brows knitted together in irritation. "We're not expecting anyone," he muttered. Jessica's smile faltered for the first time. I walked to the front door with measured steps, feeling them trail behind me like children who had just realized the rules of the game had changed. Without their permission, I opened the door, and there stood Mr. Gregory Price in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Matthew made in a month. Leather briefcase in one hand, the other raised in polite greeting. His voice carried all the way into the kitchen when he spoke. "Good evening, Mrs. Hayes. My apologies for the late hour. I have the documents you requested." I heard the small, wounded animal sound Matthew made behind me, half gasp, half choke. Jessica's hand flew to his arm as though she could physically hold him upright. "What documents?" she whispered, but the sweetness was gone. Only fear remained. I stepped aside and smiled, not the weak, placating smile they had grown used to, but something small and quiet and loaded with every ounce of rage I had swallowed for 2 solid years. "Please come in, Mr. Price," I said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear if they happened to be listening. We were just sitting down to a family discussion. The lawyer crossed the threshold with the calm certainty of a man who knows the law is a wall at his back. He walked straight to the living room, set his briefcase on the coffee table my husband and I had bought with our first tax refund after we finally paid off the mortgage, and opened it with a soft, deliberate click. Matthew and Jessica hovered in the doorway like ghosts, who had just realized they were the ones being haunted. I closed the front door and turned the deadbolt. The sound echoed like a period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. "Sit down," I told them, and my voice did not shake, not even a little. "We have a great deal to talk about." They sat. Mr. Price laid out the evidence the way a surgeon lays out instruments. The original deed with only my name on it. The updated will that revoked any claim they might ever have had. The temporary restraining order. The criminal complaint for fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Then he took a small remote from his briefcase, aimed it at the television. Matthew had bragged about buying with my bonus, and pressed play. For the next 43 minutes, my living room became a courtroom. 30 hours of high-definition video and crystal-clear audio, captured by 4 motion-activated cameras the size of shirt buttons, played across the screen. There was the kitchen on June 22nd. Jessica laughing about how the Medicaid wing is perfect. No one ever visits those people anyway. There was the backyard on July 3rd. Matthew on the phone telling someone, "Yeah, Mom already signed everything." Well, not exactly, but we have her signature now. 2 weeks after she's admitted, the house closes. 150 clean. There was the hallway on July 29th. Jessica practicing my signature on scrap paper while Matthew timed her with his phone, both of them giggling like teenagers sneaking cigarettes. There was the dining room on August 1st. Jessica telling a friend over speakerphone that once I was gone, they were gutting my kitchen and putting in the marble island I've always deserved. With every clip, another piece of them crumbled. Matthew's face cycled through every shade of gray. Jessica kept clutching at his arm as though she could physically stop the truth from reaching the room. When the final video ended, Mr. Price closed the laptop with the soft finality of a coffin lid. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the 30 guests who had come to celebrate my 70th birthday and, instead, bore witness to the public execution of my son's soul. "What you have just seen and heard is only a fraction of the evidence. Tomorrow morning, I will be filing formal criminal charges. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes have 12 hours to vacate this property. After that, any return without legal supervision will constitute trespassing." He placed 3 documents in front of me. I signed a new will that left everything to charity and distant cousins, who had never once treated me like a burden. I signed the eviction notice. I signed the authorization for prosecution. My hand did not tremble once. Matthew was crying openly now, shoulders shaking. Jessica was on her feet, screaming that it was all a misunderstanding, that I was senile, that the videos were deepfakes. No one in the room believed her. My cousin Susan, who had watched Matthew grow from a sticky-fingered toddler into this stranger, stood up and told him exactly what kind of man he had become. My friend Carol, who had held my hand the day I first admitted something was wrong, wrapped her arms around me and whispered that she had never been prouder of anyone in her life. When the last guest left, the house fell into a silence so complete I could hear the birthday candles guttering out one by one. Mr. Price stayed until midnight, reviewing paperwork in the corner, making certain I was safe. Upstairs I heard drawers slamming, muffled shouting, the frantic rustle of clothes being shoved into suitcases. At 1:17 a.m. Matthew came down alone. He stood at the foot of the stairs in the half-dark and looked at me as though he were seeing me for the first time in years. "Why?" he asked, voice cracked and raw. "You could have just said no. You could have kicked us out. Why destroy me?" I looked at my only child, the boy I had carried for 9 months, nursed through fevers, taught to read, cheered at graduation, and I answered him with the calm that comes when grief has finally burned itself out and left only clarity behind. "Because for 2 years you treated me as if I were already dead, Matthew, because you planned to lock me in a place where no one would ever visit me again and sell the only home I have ever known so you could buy marble countertops. Because what you did was not a family disagreement. It was a crime, and I am done being the victim of it." Jessica appeared on the landing then, face blotchy, mascara streaking rivers down her cheeks. She begged, she threatened, she promised they would disappear forever if I just dropped the charges. I looked at the woman who had once told me to my face that cooking tired me out too much and that I should leave it to the adults, and I felt nothing. Not hate, not pity, only the cold, clean certainty of a door closing forever. They left at dawn. 2 police officers stood on my porch and watched them carry out their suitcases. Matthew never looked back. Jessica did, once. Just long enough for our eyes to meet through the screen door. Whatever she saw in my face made her flinch and hurry to the car. I closed the door, turned the deadbolt, and for the first time in years the sound did not feel like a prison locking. It felt like freedom. 6 months later, the trial ended. Matthew was sentenced to 2 years in state prison and 3 years probation. Jessica got 18 months and 2 years probation. I did not attend the sentencing. Mr. Price went for me. He told me Matthew cried when the judge read the verdict, that Jessica collapsed and had to be wheeled out. I felt nothing when he told me. Only the hollow quiet that settles in after a long, loud storm has finally passed. The house is silent now, but it is my silence. Chloe, the 25-year-old nursing student who helps me 3 days a week, fills the kitchen with laughter, while we bake oatmeal raisin cookies that smell like childhood and safety. My cousin Susan drinks tea with me in the garden every Sunday and tells me about her grandchildren. Carol and I walk in the park in the evenings, our knitting needles clicking in companionable rhythm. Children from the neighborhood ring my bell, asking if the cookie lady has anything fresh from the oven, and I always do. One morning a letter arrived in Matthew's handwriting. I let it sit on the kitchen table for 3 days before I opened it. Inside were 2 pages of apologies, of realizations that came too late. of memories of building birdhouses with his father in the garage that is now mine again. He wrote that he was learning carpentry in prison, that he had built a small oak table and thought of me every time he sanded the wood smooth. He said he did not expect forgiveness, only wanted me to know he was sorry. He ended with, "You will always be my mother, and I will always be your son, even if we never speak again." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer with my wedding album and the hospital bracelet from the day he was born. I have not answered it. I may never answer it. But I did not throw it away, and that is something. This morning I woke before the sun, made coffee the way my husband taught me, strong and a little burnt, and carried it out to the garden. The roses I planted after they left are heavy with bloom. Read as defiance. The sunflowers I sowed in the spring lean their bright faces toward the light like they have secrets to tell. I sat in the wicker chair my husband used to read the Sunday paper in, and I spoke aloud to the quiet morning, to the house that has held every joy and every sorrow of my life, to the woman I was and the woman I have become. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 70 years old. This is my house. This is my garden. This is my life. And it is mine alone to live, fully, fiercely, freely, for as many days as I am granted. Then I stood up, walked inside, poured a second cup of coffee, opened the brand new notebook I bought last week, and began to write my story. Not for Matthew, not for Jessica, not even for the little boy he once was, but for every woman who has ever been told she is too old, too frail, too inconvenient to matter. I wrote the first line in a hand that no longer shakes. There are moments when silence is more dangerous than any scream, and I have decided that my silence ends here. Outside, the roses kept blooming. Inside, the coffee cooled, and page after page, I kept writing. Because I finally understand that 70 is not the epilogue. It is the chapter where the heroine stops, apologizing for taking up space, and starts living out loud. And I have never, in all my life, felt more alive. If you're watching this video, please give it a like, subscribe to Instant Revenge, and share in the comments where you're hearing this story from. I'd love to know how far it's traveled.